All right, today we are diving into a question that has, quite literally, shaped the world for 2,000 years. Was Jesus Christ a real person? Or is the whole story a hoax? We're going to walk through the case laid out by scholar Wes Huff, looking at the historical evidence and digging into that one extraordinary claim at the very center of it all, the resurrection.
And let's just get right to it. This is the big one, isn't it? Did Jesus really rise from the dead? According to Wes Huff, and really to Christianity itself, this is everything. It's not just a detail, it's the absolute heart of the faith. It's the one claim that, if it's true, changes everything. So what's the actual case for it? Let's take a look.
Okay, here's our game plan for today. We're going to start on some common ground, the historical man. Then we'll jump into the huge claim of resurrection. After that, we'll look at some of the challenges to the evidence, explore the even bigger claim of divinity, and wrap up by tackling that question of, what about all the other gods?
So, first things first. Look, before we can even get into something as wild as a resurrection, we've got to ask, was there even a man to begin with? And, on this point, there's a lot less debate than you might think.
And this is where things get really clear. On the one hand, you have what most historians, including many who aren't religious at all, generally agree on. A real guy named Jesus of Nazareth lived, he was a Jewish teacher, and he was crucified by the Romans. That's the historical bedrock. But on the other hand, you have the core Christian claim that this same guy physically came back to life. That's the dividing line right there.
Okay, so if the resurrection is the claim, what's the evidence? I mean, you can't just say something that massive without some serious backup, right? Well, the case, as Huff lays it out, basically stands on four main pillars.
So here they are. First, you've got multiple early written accounts. We know them as the Gospels. Second, the claim wasn't based on one or two people's vision, but on widespread eyewitness testimony. And the last two are all about human psychology. You have these huge, radical transformations of people who were total skeptics. And then you have the disciples themselves going from terrified and hiding to boldly proclaiming this message, even when it got them killed. And when we talk about widespread eyewitnesses, we're not just talking about a handful of people. The Apostle Paul, in one of his letters, makes this absolutely incredible claim that the risen Jesus appeared to more than 500 people at one time. And then he says, basically, hey, most of them are still alive. Go ask them yourselves if you don't believe me. It's a pretty bold move. And this might be one of the most powerful parts of the argument. Just think about it for a second. We're talking about James, his own brother, who thought he was crazy, and Saul of Tarsus, a guy who made it his life's mission to hunt down and destroy Christians. What on earth could possibly make those two men do a complete 180? The argument is that only something real, something earth-shattering, like seeing their crucified brother and leader alive again, could cause that kind of change.
Okay, but of course, it's not that simple, is it? These are extraordinary claims, and they don't go unchallenged. A solid case has to be able to stand up to tough questions. So let's look at some of the pushback.
And here's a big one you hear all the time. The idea that, come on, these were people from 2,000 years ago. They didn't have science, they were superstitious, maybe they were just gullible. How can we possibly trust their testimony? It's a fair question.
Well, Huff pushes back hard on this with a concept called chronological snobbery. It's this subtle prejudice we have that assumes, just because we live later and have smartphones, that we're somehow smarter or more clear-headed than people in the past. The argument is simple. People in the first century knew the difference between someone who was alive and someone who was dead. Being ancient doesn't mean you're an idiot. And this is such a crucial point. How do we know anything at all about the ancient world? I mean, everything we know about figures like Emperor Tiberius or Julius Caesar comes from analyzing written testimony from that period. The argument here is that we should apply those same historical standards to the Gospels. You can't just have a different set of rules and throw them out because they contain miracles. All right, so the case keeps building. A resurrection is one thing, but Christianity claims something even bigger, that this man Jesus was actually God. And to even begin to understand that claim, you have to get the language right in its original context.
And this is where context is absolutely everything. For us today, the phrase Son of God might sound kind of like a Greek myth, like Hercules was the son of Zeus. But in a first-century Jewish context, oh no, it was a direct claim to share the very identity and authority of God himself. And the people who heard him say it knew exactly what he meant, which is why the charge they leveled against him was blasphemy.
And it wasn't just talk either. According to the accounts, his actions backed it up. Think about it.
In that culture, only God could forgive sins. So when Jesus looks at someone and says, "Your sins are forgiven," he's claiming to do something only God can do. Same with accepting worship. For a devout Jew, that was unthinkable. Worship was for God, period. The words and the actions were a total package.
Okay, so this brings us to what is, especially for us today, maybe the biggest challenge of all. If the evidence for this one God is so strong, what do you do with the thousands of other religions and gods that have existed throughout history?
You've definitely heard this one before, right? It's a classic argument. Humanity has worshipped thousands of gods. Why is yours the one special, real one? The implication is that because there are so many competing options, they must all be human inventions.
To tackle this, Huff uses this fantastic courtroom analogy. Imagine a murder case with, say, 10 different suspects. Now let's say the prosecutor presents overwhelming evidence, DNA, fingerprints, multiple witnesses, that proves suspect number 3 is the killer. Does the fact that the other 9 suspects are innocent somehow make suspect 3 innocent too? Of course not. The point is, competition doesn't cancel out reality. The existence of other religions doesn't in itself disprove the evidence for any single one. You have to look at the evidence for each case on its own merits.
So what this all leads to, according to Huff, is a very different definition of faith. The argument is that this isn't about a blind leap in the dark. Instead, it's presented as a reasonable conclusion, a decision based on historical evidence, the testimony of transformed lives, and a consistent story. It's a faith that claims to be anchored in real, tangible events. So there you have it. We've gone from the historical man that most scholars agree on, to the evidence presented for his resurrection, to the staggering claim of divinity, and we've even looked at some of the biggest counterarguments. The case has been laid out, and now the only question left is, what does the evidence suggest to you?